Good morning, Kellen, or should I say good evening, mate?
Good evening, Matt. Thanks for having me. Yeah, good morning to you.
It's great to have you with us here, mate. So we've had a
Absolutely.
fair few questions come through. Sorry about that.
Sure.
We've had a fair few questions come through for you. I'll jump straight into the first one because we've only got a small amount of time there. And the first one is regarding politics. So it says, how do you find the political implications of data regarding ethnicity and criminality? For example, are there any issues for you when you correlate data that is sensitive or that it's and is too great to share?
When it comes to sensitivity, the biggest question with us is when it comes to data sharing. So, particularly, say if we're sharing with the public, that's where the sensitivity really comes in. That's one that kind of limits us sometimes with putting out that information. But most of our requests are coming directly from law enforcement partners. They're either coming through police records, traffic stops, or arrests, or coming directly through evidence data. So any kind of sensitivity to it, we're already part of that investigation. So it's being shared, but it's really just those are the things that have to be protected for, say, if we were going to do a map of crimes that are taking place in a city, we have to protect the location of potentially like a victim's home in a violent crime. We don't want to be putting that out there that anybody could just check.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all righty. Well, thank you. I think that covers that one, and probably actually is a good segue into the second question that's just come in there through as well, which is how do you collaborate or share data with the local law enforcement agencies in New York City?
Yeah, as we mentioned, when we collaborate with both New York City's local law enforcement, but also the other cities throughout our state or county government, they're usually reaching out directly to us because not New York City per se, but with a lot of the other cities, they're smaller departments. They don't have the same capabilities. They don't have the same units or software. So they're sharing their information and their casework with us and helping that we can help fill in the gaps in their investigation, help them better understand what happened with something. So a lot of that sharing might be directly, very. I mentioned old school before, whether it's coming through email or like a flash drive or even a disk that's dropped off to us that we then need to process and share back. Sometimes as simple as PDFs, but we do have particularly when it comes to other states and other fusion centers like ours, which brings together local, state, and federal law enforcement. We do have the ArcGIS portal to portal collaboration where we could have our information behind our secure server, but then we could share with that other law enforcement without sharing too much publicly. As I mentioned in the last part about trying to keep sensitive information from just being released, we want to protect people's information. There is the ArcGIS Hub where more law enforcement agencies, I know of particular, Rochester out in Western New York has a great site set up where they share with their public information on 911 calls, burglaries, other kinds of crime, but just anonymized down. So we're not directly going into people's homes, but they can tell about their neighborhood or their city, about what's going on and how safe they are.
Okay, awesome. No, that's a great response. I think you mentioned a fusion center there before. Is that similar to our crisis coordination centers here in Australia?
I believe it is. We have them set up in each state. Some have different roles. Some are very concerned about what they call all hazards, which may have to do with the coronavirus or the wildfires out in California. And some of them are just what's called all crime, which are focused on trying to reduce crime within the state, trying to share information with local, state, and federal law enforcement partners, trying to protect against potential terrorist attacks. I think it's very similar where we would stand up for an emergency event or a crisis, but also we're sitting there 24/7, 365 to make sure we're always sharing that information and working together.
Okay, yeah, that sounds very similar, especially to some of our state and federal centres there. Alrighty, so we better get on to the next one. We're getting through our time slot here now. So first up, it says interesting presentation, Kellen. Well done. I'd have to agree with that. And then the question is, in an emergency call, how do you gather and engage with live data, such as traffic information flows?
So if I were to step back to a few years ago when I worked as a local crime analyst and we were doing
Yep.
real-time crime analysis, this was in Baltimore City in Maryland. I was not lucky enough to have live traffic information, but when we did have calls come through, we did have an AVL map of all of our units' locations, their vehicles, where we had officers, where other 911 calls may be going, and where we might have aerial units up, so that we could always pull in somewhere closer. If we knew there was a call going on nearby that we could pull officers from, if it was something minor, or if there was something we had to steer away from. Let's say we have a major sporting event is just letting out and we have to send our officers around a different way. The dispatch units would usually be plugged into particularly that data to help them out and get to where they need to be as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. That was good. I think that's answered that question well. So on to the next question that's just popped up. So you showed us analyzing data over time to solve a robbery, and you mentioned being in court there. How would you share this type of information with, say, a judge in court?
So in that particular situation, I would be sharing it out as an animation, and then I would take that video and I usually incorporate it into a PowerPoint presentation that might have evidence photos of, let's say, a suspect's vehicle that they fled in, and if there was evidence found in the car. And we might also have slides showing maybe other movement data where a suspect lived, like in the time example where they were way up on the northern border and they headed all the way down to the city. If we knew there were stolen goods and they were selling it at another point, we might put that pawn shop or that secondhand store on there, slide by slide, incorporating our static maps that may come from a PDF or JPEG, or as well as our animations and videos to tell the complete story of what we were able to analyze, what I was able to put together from that evidence, and then share with the jury.
Thank you very much, Kellen. We're getting a little bit of feedback coming through your feed there. So what we're going to do, sadly, is have to jump through the Q&As and move on to the next session. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Have a great day, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, mate. Champion.